Welcome to Better Business by Design with Olga Papageorgiou and Peter Metcalf. In this podcast, we discuss what really makes organizations work and why so many struggle to turn good intentions into consistent results. Through our work with leadership teams, we've seen that better performance doesn't happen by accident. It comes from deliberately designing how an organization thinks, plans, and executes. In each episode, we'll share what we've been seeing in practice, so what works and what doesn't, and what leaders can do differently if they want to design a better business on purpose. Pete, good to see you again.
Hi, Olga, glad to see you too. How are you doing?
So we're good. So we're back for our second episode of Better Business by Design. How's your last week been?
It's been good, busy.
Yeah.
Customers keeping me well occupied with the challenges of business and helping them to
Yes.
design a better world for them. But yeah, always good fun. And you?
Yeah. Yeah, similar. Been working with a few customers, have a couple of more global engagements going on at the moment, which is exciting, and some really interesting um, insights that are coming through, I think, about the current state of where organizations are at with uh, planning and governance, and then adding on these layers of like data and AI and what that means for everyone, which I think we can talk about in the future because a lot feels like it's changing rapidly, but at the same time, a lot feels very familiar in
Yeah,
terms of all the change that is occurring right now.
yeah, yeah. It adds a certain amount of complexity, doesn't it, when the data and the artificial intelligence topic hits the table.
Yeah.
And as you and I know, we're still in a lot of cases trying to get organisations to get the basics and the foundations in place before they
Yeah,
started
exactly.
on
Yeah.
those
Yeah,
journeys.
it's really interesting to watch people desire this complexity when the day-to-day in of itself is so complex. So, and how to navigate that in a healthy way, and not, quash their ambition to get to sort of those higher levels of sophistication, but really have an honest conversation about what does it truly mean to do that effectively.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've had a major multinational come to me in the last week, and they want some refresher education, and I've asked them why and what are their major issues, and they've done an internal survey, and all of the responses that they're getting all lead back to the fundamentals: communication, process design, people understanding their roles and responsibilities. It's pretty basic stuff,
Yeah.
but it's still,
Mm.
you know, it still disrupts organisations in their day-to-day activities and trying to achieve their
Yeah.
business result and creating chaos.
100%. 100% agree. So, being at episode 2, we talked about last week, we gave ourselves a bit of an intro and why we're doing this podcast. And we talked a little bit about Oliver Wight, like it's known, but like the history, and I think it had such a rich history, is
Mm.
not something that is, I would say, commonly known um,
Yeah,
amongst the business world. So we thought we'd just give a little intro into Oliver Wight, the organization and the person, and share something interesting that many people probably wouldn't have seen from Oliver Wight, the man's life uh, from when he left us. So, Pete, I'm going to throw over to you because
Mhm.
you're more seasoned Oliver Wight associate than I am to give us your um, the background that you know of when it comes to Oliver Wight.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll try and recall the history as best as I can. Unfortunately, I didn't get to meet Oliver Wight, and the organisation we work for is obviously named after the gentleman that founded the business, as is the case with a lot of organisations. But Oliver Wight himself, or Ollie as he's affectionately known, was known, started the business back in the late 1960s, up in the northeast corner of the United States of America, in a place called, I think it was New London, New Hampshire. And he was a very passionate manufacturing person. And at that particular point in America's history, he was very passionate about ensuring that manufacturing remained the backbone of the American dream, if you like, and the American economy. But he also noticed that having worked in a number of organisations, and I think maybe even eventually doing some consulting work, that he found that organisations weren't as organised and well structured as perhaps they could be, and as a result, their business results and their success wasn't optimised. And so he started out basically down on the factory floor talking about production control and inventory control, and designing, taking the complexity of all of that, which if you've worked in the manufacturing world, you know how complex that can get. And he was taking that complexity and trying to turn it into relative simplicity. And he had a gift for actually explaining the logic of how things worked within a factory, all the way through to finished product production. And so I guess he must have thought that there was an opportunity there for him to go and share his experience and his knowledge with other companies. And so he set up the Oliver Wight Company, Oliver Wight Associates, and he travelled around the US from what I could gather, teaching courses on production planning, inventory control, etc., etc. And he used to get big crowds. He used to go to, I think, five-star hotels, book out the ballroom, and he get lots of people coming along and very interested in the work he was doing. And as he travelled around the countryside teaching people, he found that there was a lot of interest, obviously, from the people attending, and they would inquire as to whether he could come and support them privately. And so, long story short, he eventually said yes to those requests, and he started doing work privately, if you like, setting up the consulting business. And he realised then that he couldn't do it all by himself, so then he started to recruit other people. One of the most famous one is a guy called Walt Goddard. Walt was his first, I think, partner. And from there, the business evolved. And so processes like material requirements planning, manufacturing resource planning, etc., and then ultimately into the 1980s, sales and operations planning, and then through to where we are today with integrated business planning. All of these processes have got a large Ollie Wight footprint or thumbprint on them, which organisations are enjoying today.
Yeah. So like Oliver Wight in of himself, he died in 1983, I think
Yeah,
it was.
unfortunately,
So
yeah,
some of the fruits of his labor were kind of pulled through by Oliver Wight associates or people that worked really closely with him. So people like Walt Goddard, like you mentioned, people like
yeah.
Dickley.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
Christopher Gray, I think, as well, um, with MRP2, which is the extension of MRP. So all of these threads kind of can be traced back to the way that he thought about the way that organizations ran and how you set yourselves up for success so that these basically the way I describe it is the routine can be done routinely and then you can
yeah,
add more sophistication as that is kind of under control.
yeah, definitely, yeah, yeah. And Ollie
Yeah.
had from what I gather, Ollie had a great knack for turning complexity into simplicity, and was able to tease out a lot of the symptoms or the causes
Mm.
of issues, and isolate the key symptoms, and come up with reasonably logical solutions to the problems for
Yeah.
organisations. And it's one of those traits that, turning complexity to simplicity that I found very attractive. And I think, even when you started, Olga, you would have probably felt that, yeah, that's one of the redeeming features of Oliver Wight is its ability, and the people that work for Oliver Wight to be able to turn that complexity into simplicity.
Most definitely. I think we the way I would describe it, and this goes back to like Oliver White starting that checklist. You know, what are the then the reason why it was a checklist, it wasn't to kind of go, well, if you tick all these things, then you're good. It's more like these are the considerations that we're seeing because we've dealt with so many organizations, and these are the common issues that pop up. And if you haven't got these things in place, you'll start to experience those issues that organizations who struggle experience.
Yeah,
So why don't you, and it was public, it wasn't hidden, and this is what I like everything that we do is freely available.
yeah,
And for better or worse,
yeah,
it's not a mystery. Even though some people feel like it might be a mystery, if you look and you go to any of our websites, there's heaps of materials that we publish. There's heaps of books that have been published about all the topics around the integrated business model and all the concepts that we talk about and our standards and checklists, all freely available. So
mm,
that thinking and all that knowledge from all the associates has built from what Ollie started to inform that body of knowledge around what is best practice when managing an organization. And I think one of the funniest things, and I'm sure this happens across all the advisory world, is just noticing like when people come to our website to download things, how many of them are not, people in industry, they're people in advisory going back to the rich source material, which is
yeah,
not a bad thing. Like, use it. Like, if you need it, use it. But that's why it's there. But you can't deny that it's coming back to this one man who really wanted to break the mold and help everyone succeed.
yeah. I think if he was still alive today, he'd be in awe of what the organisation has been able to achieve over the years. Um, and in our region, Asia Pacific, we look after India, and we don't have a big representation in India. We work there occasionally, mainly with multinational companies. And I worked with
Yeah.
one there last year, and I'm speaking to some of the younger people in the team that are doing the planning work, and asking them if they'd ever heard about Oliver Wight, and it really surprised me that they all said, "Oh yeah, yeah." When we were at college at university, a lot of the reference books that we used are Oliver Wight reference books, and so we always throw out that claim, don't we? That we wrote the books, well you
Yeah.
didn't, I didn't, but our forefathers, if you like, they were the ones that were instrumental in putting these thoughts on paper and then, as you say, making them available to the public,
Yeah.
and um, and they're spread around the world.
Yeah. And this is where that intersection, I think often there's these conceptions around, oh, well, consultants just talk theory. But I would argue that I can't think of one, all of the material that has been published has been based on experience trying to implement best practice in industry. And I think that's what makes it very unique because it's people who have struggled with these things and continue to refine them. And as new technology comes on board, as new other practices like, things that we talk about, like, agile and stuff like that come into play, understanding what does it mean for best practice in business. We're constantly evolving that and challenging ourselves as to, is this still relevant? Like a great one at the moment, which we can talk about soon, is
Mhm.
this concept of continuous planning. And
Yeah,
it's like, Well, I would argue that Oliver Wight was always a proponent of continuous planning.
Yes.
Um, but what is the definition of continuous planning? What I would argue is the current view of continuous planning is actually demand sensing and response to immediate changes in demand, which I don't think is continuous planning. I think that's just reactivity, to be
It's a
honest.
continuous reaction.
Correct, yeah. And
No,
and and this goes back to, just creating that base level of understanding, like what is planning? What do we mean by planning?
no,
And that confusion between planning and delivering a plan and the different roles and responsibilities around, okay, my plan is a series of decisions and activities that I'm organizing my organization around to achieve a certain goal.
no.
Um, which was defined by a strategic plan, which is another type of plan. And then you start getting into what does that mean for the day to day that I'm doing today? That thread often gets missed.
Yeah,
And then this sense is, oh well, if we just see the signal sooner, then we can respond fast and we can fix everything. It's like, no, but you have a fixed amount of capability in your business that you can only respond so much
yes,
without completely reorganizing your organization. So it's really super interesting. So,
yeah,
and we should continue to challenge that, in my view.
yeah, yeah. And it takes us back to the start of the Oliver Wight business because he was observing these things too, and he
Yeah.
was basically saying you can only do what you can do with the resources that you have available to you. So just that basic understanding of what materials do you require to make something, and what do you have on hand, and what do you need to get before you can actually start producing them was a fundamental premise behind everything he did. This concept of demonstrated performance and having
Yeah.
visibility of what you have available to you. And so his ethos was very much around education, wasn't it?
Mm,
It was teaching people. It was making them aware of, here's your problem, and this is the cause of the problem. So how do we fix it, and why would we do it this way? So it was about educating individuals or groups of people so that once they had their knowledge, they could go and transfer that into their organisations. And he was very strong on that particular principle that we're not doing the work for you. We will work alongside
mm.
you, and we will
Yes.
guide you and show you the way. But it's your business, and you will be here long after we've disappeared. And by the way, we don't want to be here for a long time. We just want to come here and observe maybe where your issues are, show you the light, and guide you in a new direction. And that's always been, that transfer of knowledge, that education piece has been
Mm,
at the forefront of our organisation and continues to be the
yeah.
same today, and continues
Yeah.
to be one of the key differentiators.
Yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure if he pioneered it, but he very much embraced the idea of remote learning type pieces. Like he created videos and in the early days to educate vast numbers of people and that kind of
Yeah,
train the trainer concepts. And he, again, like he didn't want to keep all the knowledge for himself. His whole ethos was everyone needs to know. If we build everyone's capability, we'll collectively get better, right?
definitely.
So which is a great thing to be associated with. We're not trying to gatekeep things. We're not trying to obfuscate what success looks like.
No,
What we do, as you mentioned, is we see it playing out multiple times and we can help you understand how to avoid other organizations' mistakes while keeping the essence of your organization and protecting what gives your organization competitive advantage.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it was always
Um,
that was always his number one objective, is that we're here
yeah,
for the customer, and the customer success
yeah,
is the most important thing, which
yeah,
carries on
agreed.
today. I can recall when I first
Mm,
met the Oliver Wight organisation in 1989, and you talked about technology, and they were ahead of their time again there because they set up a whole series of videos, and I can remember going on a 5-day course, and with the company I was working with at that time, and then I had to become the educator within the organisation, and the support material I
Yeah.
had was a whole series of videos that
Mm.
that, the organisation had made available to us.
Yeah. It was like, we think that today we're all we're pioneering with this idea of remote type learning and things like that. It's like, no, actually, like there were ways to do that back in the day. It wasn't.
Exactly.
And
Yeah,
sometimes we overcomplicate things and things that, what's old kind of becomes new again, right?
yeah, definitely. Yeah. And the beauty of
So
that
I've
is
got,
that
oh, go
here is
ahead.
Oliver White on the video talking, and usually you would see him in person, and you'd get him for a day, and that was it, and everybody disappeared, went back to work. But with the video, you had him forever, for as long as that video
Mm,
lasted. You took it away with you, and you could replay it, and you could share it with other
yeah,
people.
yeah,
Once again, that principle of trying to spread the message to as many people as he could do.
yeah.
So
So I
what
pulled
have
up
you got here?
the In Memoriam. Not that you'll be able to read, like everyone who's watching could be able to read it in detail, but it does kind of solidify, like, who we're talking about. He was a legitimate, he had a legitimate impact on industry, and this was written by Walt, who was his business partner, the first person to be an associate of Oliver Wight, other than Oliver Wight. Also, he's from his closest friend, right? So, and his son David Goddard is part of the organization today and has shared about Ollie and Walt's friendship and why it made Oliver Wight a special place to work. But a couple of things that strike me out of here and are so relevant today in the types of conversations that we have in the age of AI, one piece around Ollie recognized the potential of computers and their limitations, and he's quoted as saying, "Systems don't generate results; people do." And I just look at statements like that, and just think this is that insight so early on in the computer age to
Mm.
identify that we cannot defer to the systems. We still need to have agency over how an organization runs is, and in such a simple phrase, is amazing. You can say I could take this and say this was said yesterday, and people would believe that, in my view.
Yes, yeah. He was very insightful, wasn't he?
Yeah,
And this, uh, and if you recall, this was, he started the business back in the late 60s, early 70s, and this is when business computing was really starting to to take off. Companies like IBM were really starting to advance the technology to apply it in business settings. Um, and this is where I think we often use the phrase "people, process, tools," which is
yeah,
which was my understanding was born out of the Oliver Wight organisation, and
yeah,
was Ollie and his colleagues reflecting the fact that there are these three key components to get integration, and technology is only one piece of it. But importantly, the people should be defining the process, and from there we work out whether we need any technology to enable it.
in that same paragraph, Walt goes on to say, that recognition that, the user is who's in charge, and they need to be educated in order to have accountability. That's still completely applicable all these
Yeah,
decades on from that, when those statements were made. Um, just
yeah.
yeah, it's principles.
And in subsequent years, and even today, we still
Yeah.
find it where you'll talk to people who are using systems or maybe not using the systems. And in the cases where they're not using the systems, they're saying, well, the system doesn't reflect the way we do things around here. And the
Mm.
way we do things around here are the process. And so, well, who designed the process? Well, presumably the people. So to Ollie's point here, um, if the user is in charge, if the user is educated, he or she will then accept the accountability for the system, meaning the design of that system and the applicability to the organisation. And not
Yeah.
just this is a bit of software that the software provider has sold to us and explained that it has best practice built into it. We've
Yeah.
actually been very specific about it's not the tail wagging the dog, is it?
No.
It's it's we as an
100%.
organisation, we know what best practice process looks like. We've designed the right process for our business, and now we've got a solution to enable that,
Yeah,
and not
exactly.
the other way around.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, the other piece that, so the next two paragraphs kind of, which are the final ones I want to kind of highlight in this big piece, but
Yeah.
he then goes on to talk about how Ollie was an advocate for simplicity, um, and he often would fight organizations that got too complex. And he talks about simplicity being the ultimate sophistication, which just it's true. We create a lot of confusion and think that things are very complex, but we've created that complexity ourselves. So we need to get back to the fundamentals of what does it mean to effectively run your organization so that we can then think about any other layers of sophistication. But if that the routine things are not done routinely and everything feels like an exception, then yes, it will feel really complex to run your business.
Yeah, indeed. And that's the bit that resonated the most with me when I joined Oliver Wight, or even first experienced Oliver Wight for me, which was back in 1989, was that overarching desire to turn complexity into simplicity, and then recognizing that businesses are complex and it's not always straightforward, but we've got to get the fundamentals in place first.
Yeah.
And everything I think that we teach nowadays is built around that particular concept, which some
Yeah.
people in
And the final,
organisations still have trouble grasping because most people are down in the
yeah.
minutiae, and
Hmm.
but I've got a lot to do and I've got a busy job and it's very complex. You don't understand the way we do things around here. But when you try and lift people up in the helicopter and get above the business and look at it in a holistic sense, you can see what Ollie was trying to teach people.
Yeah. Completely agree. And then the last thing just to reflect on is, and I don't know, as a millennial, I think our perception of corporate structures in the past was that they weren't very human centered. I would say if you ask most millennials, I believe that they would have this view of the world that it was very like hierarchical and you just did whatever the boss said. And, it was only kind of in the 90s when we started thinking that people had feelings, is the kind of, I think, if you asked around, that's the kind of mentality that we would have about the past.
Yes.
And when I read this, um, it did strike me that actually I think we've simplified the past. Like we've put our lens on the past and not really sought to understand because Ollie, you know, really championed leaders taking ownership for their businesses. And in that quote, he says, "For a boss, you'll do what you have to do. for a leader, you will do what you can do. So he didn't just blame the lowest common denominator of an organization for things going wrong. He
Mm.
really advocated for strong leadership and leaders being able to inspire people to bring their best to work. And that was in the 60s and the 70s. It wasn't
Yeah.
this like, this isn't a new concept. It's just a question of, how far did it permeate and how far did it, were we able to land that in organizational mindset.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've actually lived through that transition, Olga, because my first years in the corporate world were very much in that hierarchical uh, command and control type organization where you do what the boss says. So for a boss, you'll do what you have to do, which is what I always used to work to. If the boss wants me to
Yeah.
do this, I'll do that. Whereas as the years went by, as you say, the transition into getting more out of people by having empathy and showing leadership, all of the leadership characteristics that we talk about nowadays, um, you'll get better value from your business people if you're leading in that manner. So I've seen the transition, and
Yeah.
today that's what we're obviously encouraging.
Yeah. But and even today it's not as simple as, well, everyone's on this mindset and every organization is got leadership that is bringing the best out of their people. Like I still witness today command control style um leadership even in 2026.
Oh yeah,
So
definitely.
to
Yeah,
think that it's as black and white as,
yeah,
oh, before it used to be like this and now it's like this is not true.
yeah. And a lot of it, well, a lot of it, I'd probably say all of it, is cultural, isn't it? And we find it looking after the Asia Pacific region and getting to, well, and even beyond Asia Pacific, we get to work with different companies in different countries around the world, and depending on their cultures, we'll see uh, very very dramatic differences in the way that they manage and lead people.
Yeah,
Which once again you have
100%.
to accommodate, and we've got to have the cultural intelligence to be able to understand what drives them to operate that way, and how do we then equally try and assist them in
Yeah.
designing a better business.
Mm. Yeah. And I think part of the approach is also just acknowledging, like, where is that organization's desire to go? Um, you know, if they don't really want to be leaders in, like, if they don't have that innate desire as an organization to really push the boundaries and drive ahead and be destructive,
Mm.
adopting these changes in mindset becomes way more difficult because you can just continue a business ticking along with a command and control
Sure.
leader.
Yeah.
It'll still tick along.
Yeah.
Whether it will be able to, identify new growth opportunities, innovate, all those sorts of things come down to how do you bring out the best in everyone. So, but if you have no desire to do that, and I haven't experienced it, but I have heard organizations give feedback to colleagues saying, well, we actually just want to be followers. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, well then here's a framework where you can be a good follower.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, it's making sure that we understand what they actually want and where they want to be in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. Agree. Couldn't agree more.
So that's it for today in terms of what we had to kind of talk about.
Yeah.
But I think yeah, it makes me proud at least to see that our beginnings were traced back to someone that really wanted to do net good
Mm.
in industry.
Yeah.
And now obviously we're global. Ollie started in America, but now we have a global presence. We're across multiple industries. So like it did have the manufacturing heart, but we've done everything in between. Um, and we've built such an amazing body of knowledge, which is like such a honor to be a custodian of and continue to push this knowledge forward into industry.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think you see that as you've met people from around the world in the Oliver Wight organisation, and they all have similar characteristics and similar beliefs
Yeah.
and similar passion, and
Mm.
just carrying that torch, if you like, that Ollie set up way back in the 60s, and continuing. It's almost religious. it's, but it's the phrase that always comes to mind to me is common sense.
Yeah.
When I first heard Oliver Wight people talk about planning and executing a business, it just sounded like common sense. And we continue to talk common sense. Well, I passionately believe we do talk common sense nowadays, and that's what really resonates with people when you work with them. So
Yeah.
let's continue the charge on common sense and continue to
Agreed.
talk about how we get that.
Yeah. Well, it's been fabulous chatting with you today about this topic.
Likewise.
Um, and I think it gives our listeners a lot of context when we start kind of talking about more technical topics where our mindset will come from. It will come from people, simplicity, you know, making sure that it's human centered and we're not just defaulting to systems or templates and things like that. We're thinking through how the business is administered and what decisions people need to make for the business to be successful. And we'll always that will be the common thread that you'll see when we ask questions and we explore topics. So if people want to reach us, they can email us information@oliverwight.com. They can leave a comment here or reach out to us on LinkedIn. But happy to answer any questions and as they come throughout the show. But thanks for joining in, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks, Olga. See you everyone.
Thanks for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening on Spotify, it would be great if you could leave us a 5-star review, as it really helps others discover the podcast. We'll be back soon with more real-world conversations on how you can build a better business by design.